Hi, this is Kevin Frank. Today is August 11th, 2020. Once again, I'm here with Dr. Jeff Andresen to provide the weather update for the week. So, Jeff, fill us in on what we can expect and what we've seen in the last 7 days.
We'll be happy to. And I'll start here. My lead image this morning was from courtesy of last night, and it's an automated image, but it's still pretty graphic. It shows a severe thunder, line of severe thunderstorms approaching the western shore and southwestern lower. This is South Haven, and this is just again around 6:30 p.m. last night. But major of Derecho is the name of this type of event. I just want to start with that. And it turns out I think Michigan got very lucky, considering what happened to our west and to our south. The event yesterday, and a derecho, I should start with what is a derecho, and we've heard this word. It's a Spanish origin, but a derecho is an organized cluster of thunderstorms that respond primarily to strong upper air dynamics, and that was certainly the case in last night or yesterday. And also the energy for the thunderstorms is very warm, hot, moist, humid air down at the low levels, and we had both of those stacked up, just in almost a perfect type of situation for this type of event. And one of the issues with, we look at the type of damage that we've seen on the media and realize it was not tornadic winds, although the winds that are reported here in derechos, which are frequently more than 60, 70 miles per hour. Yesterday, we actually had some 100 mile per hour plus winds. They're straight line thunderstorm winds, and the problem is they tend to occur over a relatively large area, much larger than we typically see with a tornado or even an individual severe thunderstorm. So the derecho event that moved across the Midwest yesterday was in cases, it was a couple of 100 miles wide, very large area impacted. And that's why the numbers that we see today are just staggering. 1.5 million people without power last evening. Those are numbers which we rarely ever see. A couple of things here. The event began way out in eastern South Dakota yesterday afternoon, and then moved across eastern Nebraska and into Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, and it turned out, as you can see here, the southwest corner of lower Michigan. Amazingly and very, I think, fortuitously, when this line of severe thunderstorms approached here last evening, it weakened, and two, it began to curve more to the southeast, and that's why there was a lot more reported, a lot more damage, a lot more problems reported in Indiana. Finally, stalled out here in Ohio, and so if you do the math, basically this event moved almost 800 miles in about 14 hours. And at times, when it was yesterday late afternoon and yesterday evening, the line was moving at over 70 miles per hour to the east. That's another thing that's very unusual, but it's another sign of that link to the upper air, to the jet stream aloft, which is a very, well, it's a primary factor in describing why these thunderstorms can continue to self-sustain and last for hours and hours and hours. Again, 14 hours is a long time for any weather event, let alone a thunderstorm. So a couple of things down at the bottom here. In the middle here, this is my nephew's driveway, and unfortunately his car's his house in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and he said basically almost every house on his block looked the same way. Massive damage there, and again, it was a wide, lot of damage in the Chicago area, and is close in Michigan again to the southwest corner. It appears that the worst damage in Michigan was down in Berrien County. We did have several reports of 60 mile per hour plus winds there, and I did see one report of 1-inch hail, although I haven't heard of any damage associated with that. But 1-inch hail is certainly usually pretty destructive. But again, it could have been, given the direction, given the way the line was set up in Wisconsin, Illinois, it could have been much worse for Michigan than turned out. So that's a positive thing. In terms of precipitation, it was famine or feast, depending on where you were. I've got a couple of the radar pics aren't all available for this last night, but the heaviest rain from the system actually fell across the northern part of the lower. In particular, a line here from just to the east of Muskegon, east-northeast on up towards Lake Huron. And there, at least our radar reports, I have not seen any on the ground yet, but there are radar reports of more than 4 inches in that. It was essentially a line of thunderstorms that was stationary for several hours. And that's something else that was a pretty unusual or odd. In the lower left-hand corner here, this is Detroit's or the White Lake radar. On the other end of the scale, you can see virtually little or no rainfall fell in the southeast. And of course, as we've been talking here over the last several weeks, that is the driest part of the state. So we'll have to mention that more because it's another miss for them. And again, it's not helping any to not have any water in these. At least some areas of the state got some rain. So on probably the largest derecho event or an event like this in several years in many parts of the Midwest, maybe at least 10 years. So it's a pretty big deal, but fortunately for us, it could have been worse. So we look at the week in review here quickly. Our mean temperatures for the past week did turn out to be near normal or even a little bit warmer than normal in the far north to a degree or two cooler than normal. Again, something we haven't seen a whole lot of this season. You can see in other parts of the Midwest actually significantly cooler than normal, especially as you go down towards the Ohio Valley. But for most of the state, again, near to a degree or two below. So that's a bit of a change. And we did have some very pleasant weather here during the last week to report. Precipitation on the right-hand side here, this does include last night's rainfall, and you can see some of the pattern. There's that line I mentioned here, talked about a very heavy rainfall across portions of west central and northern lower Michigan, where, again, a lot of areas saw 1 to 2 inches, but contrast that with down here in the southeast corner where little or no rainfall, certainly less than 1/4 of an inch for a large part of a portion of that part of the state. So, and continued heavy rains up in a lot of the upper peninsula, more than 1 inch, especially as you go out towards the western part of upper Michigan. So big differences in moisture depending on where you are. Degree day totals for the season here thus far, ranging from just about normal to several days to more than a week ahead of normal. So even though we did have a little bit cooler than normal week, we're still running ahead in terms of heat accumulation for virtually all of the state and most of the region for that matter. In terms of the drought or dryness, and this is last week's U.S. Drought Monitor reflecting conditions as of the middle of last week. Last week's index did not change from the previous week. That was the one that went back to the last week in July. 54% of Michigan either in the D0 abnormally dry or D1 moderate drought category, so really unchanged. But given what we've seen here over the last 24 hours with the lack of rain in the southeast and given the forecast, we likely will see, unfortunately, probably some expansion of that in this week's issuance, if not now, likely for next week. So this one won't be going away, at least not anytime soon, given our outlook. And speaking of our forecast here today, the front which moved through the state last night and was part of the overall dynamics of this crazy severe weather event, you can see, well, this was 8 o'clock. That front's now pushed past the southeastern corner of the state, and high pressure is behind it. It's drawn on the map here. The blue line that you see here is certainly a cold front, and the air indeed behind this front is a few degrees cooler than what we experienced over the last couple of days, but not that much so. The big difference in the air mass actually is in terms of humidity. The dew point temperatures have fallen significantly behind the front, and instead of low 70s and upper 60s like we saw yesterday over most of the state, our dew points now have fallen into the upper 50s and low 60s. So a little bit cooler temperatures, but significantly or noticeably less humid than was the case yesterday. And that's where we're going to be here for the next several days, although we will see a bit of a warming take place tomorrow and then continue for the rest of the week. So we are looking at warmer than normal temperatures through the work week and then well into the weekend before the next change in weather. Moving to tomorrow, high pressure right over the state, beautiful conditions, beautiful day, albeit a few degrees warmer than normal. We'll see highs, backing up to today, mostly in the upper 70s and low 80s across the state, and a very, very comfortable night tonight with lows into the 50s in most locations, but it will warm up tomorrow. We'll see mid and probably some upper 80s tomorrow and continue there for the rest of the week and probably Saturday as well. Low temperatures increasing into the 60s, so not quite what we saw here over the last few days with very, very warm nighttime temperatures, but still several degrees above the climatological normals this time of year. By Thursday morning at 8 o'clock, still more high pressure, another beautiful day, sunny, dry, fair conditions, but the next weather system is starting to get its act in gear out here to our north and west over the northern plains. That will be here. Some of the model guidance is suggesting as early as Friday. I personally think that might be pushing it a bit. We could call it an outside chance of maybe an isolated shower by Friday, but I think it'll be at least until Saturday, probably until overnight Saturday or Sunday before we see a significant threat of rainfall with this system, and then that will probably continue into Monday. The guidance right now is also suggesting another fairly strong trough or wave feature in the jet stream, which is just to our north. That will move by late in the weekend and early next week. And so two things. One is that's going to one of our best chances for rainfall, the next best chances for rainfall. And again, I think Sunday, Monday timeframe right now is the way that looks. After that wave goes by, it's going to drag down some Canadian origin air behind it. So at least for the beginning of next week, we will see a significant cooling off back to probably even a little bit below normal or cooler than normal for the early part of the week. But then all of the medium range guidance, and I'll show you that in just a second here, suggests that we go back to where we've been, and that's warmer than normal. Precipitation totals, though, with what we're talking about here over the next week, still remaining below normal. This is the forecast amounts through next Tuesday morning, the 18th, and you can see they range from less than 1/4 of an inch over large portions of the lower peninsula to maybe about 1/2 inch or so in the north. Even so, in the north, even though it's more, those are still below where they should be this time of year. So we are looking in general at a warmer and drier than normal week here coming up. That's, and I think, fairly high confidence with both the temperature forecast and the precipitation forecast for that time frame. Potential evapotranspiration rates are a little bit elevated, 1500ths to about 1800ths for most of the state per day on average, and that's again largely due to full sun or mostly sunny skies and warmer than normal temperatures. So a little bit more, the water needs will be a little bit elevated this coming week over what they typically are. And it's the middle of August, so they typically are fairly high, but a little bit higher than normal expected here, especially over the next several days. In the medium range forecast time frame, I mentioned that after that cooling, a little piece of cooler air early next week, the same upper air feature basically returns. The center of the ridge axis is out over the high plains and into the Rockies. That leaves Michigan here just on the downwind side, a little bit of weak northwesterly flow aloft. But we've seen that much of the growing season. And along with that, you can see this is true for both the 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day timeframes, expectations of a continuation of warmer than normal mean temperatures. Note, however, that there is an area just to our south for this time frame, the 16th through the 20th, across the Ohio Valley and middle Mississippi Valley, where cooler than normal weather. Some of that is associated with clouds, but it's also with that upper air pattern, that wave moving through that I talked about last week. Some of that there might be some residual pieces of that remaining over areas to our south. At the same time, large areas from the Rockies eastward into the Midwest also forecasting below normal precip, and that includes a lot of Michigan here, as you can see in the brown. And again, both 8 to 14 day and 6 to 10 day are very, very similar here and going warmer and drier than normal. So it looks like that pattern continuing for the middle of August and into the latter, at least the third week, if not even later than that, into the fourth week, towards the warmer and drier than normal direction. So summarizing here, much less active day weather-wise across the Midwest, but we'll see. There's some portions of eastern part of the state that will still clear off here yet this afternoon, but very, very nice day for much of the state. A little cooler and less humid, noticeably less humid, and that sets the stage for several sunny, fair, dry days coming up, likely through at least Friday and probably a good chunk of Saturday as well. Next chance for significant rainfall, probably not coming until overnight Saturday, Sunday, more likely I think on Sunday and Monday. As I mentioned, we will see our temperatures back up to above normal levels, especially by tomorrow, mostly highs in the 80s and then lows in the 60s across much of the state. We do have another change after the end of the weekend and early next week for a few days of cooler weather should be actually fairly nice. But then the medium range forecast guidance does once again suggest the same upper air pattern returns with ridging over the middle of the continent, and with that warmer than normal temperatures, and unfortunately probably a little bit drier than normal. So in those areas that have been missed, and that I look at the southeastern part of the state, that would be number one on the list. We're going to have to still deal with some dry conditions here for the next at least 1 to 2 weeks, maybe longer than that. It's certainly elevated water needs for that time frame. With that, I'll wrap it up and see if there might be any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. That I'm not sure I say it right. That Derecho, is that how you say it?
Derecho, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I'd seen some pictures from some golf courses in Iowa, kind of like I think you were commenting on that photo from your nephew or whatever, and man, it looked like a hurricane that got through those golf courses.
It is, and it's been again. We see every year we see damage from severe thunderstorms, but typically it's localized damage. It's a few miles wide, the path. So here you've got a whole line of severe thunderstorms all acting together, and instead of having just a few miles impacted, you've got a large area, more 100 or even 200 miles wide, which is just very, very uncommon, and we don't hear the word used derecho very often, but they are very, very destructive, and in terms of the economic impact, this one will be big. It'll certainly in this year it'll rank up along the top in terms of the impact it had on people, just because such a large area was affected.
Yeah, I think we were although we would have liked some of that rain here in mid-Michigan, I'm glad we missed that, because that doesn't looks like a tough situation. Wish all those folks the best in recovering from it, that's for sure. All right, Jeff, thank you very much, and we'll have you back again next week, see where we're going. Sounds like continue warm and dry as a trend.
We'll keep an eye on it, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.